Overcoming Sinful Cravings and Desires, Part 1. Because we live in an indulge your feelings oriented world, it's important to understand what the Bible says about desire. In the book of James, chapter 1, James talks about the forces at work within us. In verse 3, he says, "But each one is tempted when he is carried away and enticed by his own lust or desire." James continues, "Then when lust has conceived, it gives birth to sin." Now, there are three things James tells us here about desire. Number one, a person's own desire is what tempts him. Number two, when he gives in to his desire in a way that violates the Bible, it's sin. And three, even though we have the same basic innate or inborn desires, each person's desires are individualized. Desires are obviously felt in the body. James tells us desires and cravings come from two sources, and there are two distinct kinds. Number one, inborn desires. These desires are part of what it means to be human. For example, the desire and craving for food, the desire for water, sex, and so on. When one indulges properly in inborn desires, it's good. It honors God. However, when those are used for the wrong purpose, at the wrong time and in the wrong way, they can become evil desires. So, there are inborn desires that all people share. Number two, there are acquired desires. These desires or cravings are not inborn, they're learned. They're developed over a period of time. As a person practices a behavior, they acquire a desire for that behavior or thing. For example, eating something sweet after a meal, smoking cigarettes, jogging, pornography, Pepsi. Examples of acquired desires are endless. We've all heard someone say, "I've got to have something sweet after a meal." I remember when I was growing up, there was a lady that was a good friend of my aunt. Almost every time I saw her, which was often, and it didn't matter what time of day it was, she had a Pepsi in her hand. Acquired desires are habituated desires developed and fixed in the body by the individual himself. When a person gratifies an acquired desire, it can cause physical pleasure. She takes a swig of Pepsi and says, "Boy, that tastes good." He comes in the doorway all sweaty with his tennis shoes on and t-shirt, and he says, "Boy, there's nothing like a good jog around the neighborhood to make you feel good." On the contrary, when an acquired desire is not gratified, a person may experience a feeling of discontentment or displeasure. The Bible refers to acquired desires as being fleshly desires. The term fleshly doesn't mean that they're sinful. It simply means that they're not inborn. They're called fleshly because they're acquired, instilled in the members of your body by you. Acquired desires are not sinful when pursued and used biblically. Inborn desires are permanent. There's never going to be a time when you decide you're never going to eat again. Acquired desires are not permanent. In Colossians 3, Paul talks about immoral and impure desires. The desire for money, greed, the desire to lash out at others, malice, slander. He tells us to put these desires off. And he tells us to put on other desires like kindness, humility, patience, and so on. Acquired desires that are sinful can be put off. Acquired desires that are righteous can be put on. You can change. A person that has an acquired desire for watching pornography, for example, can change. As I said, when one indulges properly in inborn or acquired desires, it's good. However, when used for the wrong purpose at the wrong time and in the wrong way, they can be sinful. Eating an inborn desire is not sinful. Gluttony, excessive eating, is. Sex is not sinful. Sex outside of marriage is. A love for football, golf, or some other sport is not sinful. They are acquired desires. An acquired desire for sweets is not sinful. However, if you become consumed with attending or watching games on television, or buying golf clubs and country club memberships that you can't afford, or desire for sweets that affects your teeth, your weight, and your health, then they're sinful. Let me give you some more examples. Jesus points out to us in verse 13 that you are responsible when you sin. You can't blame God or anyone else. Each one is tempted by his own desires. Eating is an inborn desire. It is not sinful. Your desire to eat is aroused. You overeat. The inborn desire becomes sinful. Gluttony. Another example. You're on your way home from work. You swing by the bakery and buy some donuts. Boy, you love donuts. You eat one. You enjoy it. You say to yourself, I need to watch my weight. That's all I'm going to eat. However, you sense a desire or craving in your body to eat another one. When an inborn desire to eat or an acquired desire to eat a specific food like a donut is not under control, it's sinful. In other words, your desire urges you to take action and satisfy it in a way that displeases God. Remember James's words in verse 14, each one is tempted by his own lust or desires. The word own refers to one's personalized desires. We all don't have an acquired desire for donuts. I like donuts, but I'm not tempted by donuts. The Greek word James uses here is that's translated into the English word lust or desire, is where we get the word idiosyncrasy. An idiosyncrasy, and we all have them, is a particular unusual behavior, mannerism, or habit. For example, the woman I mentioned earlier who, no matter what time of day it was always carrying around a bottle of Pepsi. A person's repeated use of a word when speaking, like awesome, is an idiosyncrasy. We all possess the same inborn desires that manifest themselves in different ways in different people. Their individualized control or lack of self-control leads to habituated responses to different objects, circumstances, and people. Remember, each one is tempted by his own desires. Let me say it in a different way. We all sin. We all have our own style of sinning. We're all tempted, but each has his own special temptations. Now, why is it important for us to understand that? Because it means that each person needs to examine themselves and learn their desire patterns and habits in order to get control of those desires and pattern habits. When you become thoroughly acquainted with the particular object, Pepsi, Oreos, X-rated films, and circumstances that are especially tempting to you, when you become thoroughly acquainted with that desire or desires that as of yet are not under your control, then you're ready to master, overcome, or put off those fleshly desires. In part 2, I want to talk about how to put off those sinful desires and cravings.